President Muhammadu Buhari, whose Libyan leader, says what affects Libya impacts on Nigeria.
If we get those items through constitutional process of altering successfully, then our constitutional democracy will be set on the right pedestal.
Over 50 interest groups make presentations at Senate public hearing on constitutional review.
Bauchi State Ministry of Health confirms death of 20 people and 300 more cases following cholera outbreak.
On Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall be taking a look at solutions to farmers-herders clashes.
The solution to farmers-herders clashes in Nigeria has been elusive. According to some concerned Nigerians, this is so due to lack of consensus, especially between the federal government and affected states regarding the right methodology for curbing the menace.
Well, the lingering lack of consensus has been attributed to, in some instances, the sentimentalization of the otherwise sensitive national issue. Now, the clashes between farmers and herders, according to records, have claimed thousands of lives over the past 2 decades.
Farmers often complain about grazing animals wandering into farmlands at critical growth periods or even at harvest seasons, while on the other hand, the pastoralists try to secure good grazing sites for their herds. These conflicts have had far-reaching economic problems and, of course, the loss of lives and the property and source of livelihood and displacement of people from their settlements.
That's right, Kirian. Now, earlier this month, 17 southern governors resolved to ban open grazing of livestock in their states as one of the measures to stop the violent clashes between farmers and herders, and to also check the incursion of armed herders, criminals, and bandits. However, that resolution, amongst 11 others, has been criticized in some quarters and given some thumbs up by some Nigerians regardless.
Very true, Kingsley. And you know, President Muhammadu Buhari has equally expressed a strong resolve to address the conflicts of herders and farmers in a sustained and lasting manner that should lead to the emergence of a permanent solution to the frequent clashes between them, as well as the associated problem of gun-wielding killer herdsmen.
Well, according to the statement released by one of the president's spokespersons, the president, of course, has indicated the approval of a number of specific measures to bring a permanent end, as it were, to the frequent skirmishes. And those recommendations arise from the work of Sabo Nanunu, that's the Honorable Minister of Agriculture.
Yes, indeed, Kingsley. And in the course of today's program, we'll find out what these far-reaching and practical changes are and other solutions. Given the pressing urgency of addressing this perennial challenge, there's need for the full actualization of modern ways of ranching in Nigeria. This is our focus on Good Morning Nigeria today. My name is Kirian. You are welcome to the program.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I join my colleague Kirian to also welcome you to the program. We're reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority, the NTA, and of course from our Abuja headquarters studios. In the course of the program, we'll have our complimentary segments of business and newspaper review. And of course, if we have enough time, we'll also take sports. But for now, here is Musbah Udan Wahab with the highlights of the morning news. Good morning, Musbah.
So very good morning, Kingsley and Kirian. It's Children's Day in Nigeria. Happy Children's Day to our Nigeria child. Welcome to the news. President Muhammadu Buhari has played host to Mohammed Yunus Menfi, Chairman, Presidential Council of Libya, stressing that stability or otherwise in Libya has implications for countries in the Lake Chad Basin area, including Nigeria. A transitional security system that is set to support the Nigeria police force in its fight against terrorism and transitional crime has been inaugurated in Abuja. The West Africa Police Information System is a data collection and recording center that requires collaboration with law enforcement agencies to function optimally.
I would like to call on our policemen to reciprocate this gesture by continuing to dedicate themselves to the fight against these criminalities.
One cannot expect a safe and secure West Africa without a reliable police information system in place.
It has a budget of 28 million euros, which is about 16 billion naira, and it covers the area, geographical area of ECOWAS, but also Mauritania and Chad. It is designed to strengthen the capacity of those countries.
Now disturbed by the myriad of security breaches in parts of the country, the House of Representatives, after passing hundreds of resolutions, effects of which are yet to be seen, decided to convene an open forum with the hope of coming up with an innovative and practical solution. Invitees cut across key levels, including security chiefs, traditional and religious leaders, and the executive.
At this time of our national history, when insecurity threatens the authority of the state and the foundations of our nationhood, when the activities of bandits, insurgents, and criminals of every stripe impede our efforts at progress and prosperity, we must confront the realization that our previous and current approaches to addressing the challenges of insecurity have not yielded the desired result.
And a recent introduction in the southeast is another serious threat to the existence of this country, where government institutions are targeted, our police, our security agencies personnel are being killed on a daily basis.
Inconveniences that we find when security agencies implement certain policies and guidelines. Sometimes it's not convenient for the public, it's not convenient for the citizens. These inconveniences, of course, are part and parcel of the cost for peace.
The Chief of the Air Staff, Air Marshal Oladayo Amao, has constituted a committee of 7 retired senior officers to conduct a safety audit of all Nigerian Air Force operational and engineering units. A total of 57 interest groups made presentations at the Northwest Senate public hearing on Constitution Review holding in Kaduna. Issues concerning governance structure and functionality of all arms of government, including reform in the nation's security architecture, formed part of deliberations by stakeholders.
Those items through constitutional process of altering successfully, then our constitutional democracy will be set on the right pedestal.
We recommend that the issue of new national minimum wage should be under the exclusive legislative list, not under the concurrent legislative list. And then we also advocate for autonomy for local government, autonomy for judiciary, and autonomy for legislature.
The House of Representatives is strengthening the administrative and legal processes in the management of recovered assets in Nigeria. Chairman had a committee on assessment and status of all recovered.
They built the House for management of proceeds of crime, and we feel that to enrich that process, we need to look at the past, look at the mistakes that have been made in the past, and then make recommendations to correct such errors.
Those are arrested. They are handed over to the appropriate prosecuting agencies.
We have recoveries, for instance, that we are making for Lottery Commission, Federal Land Revenue Services, customs, down the years, Nigerian Post Authority, where corporate entities that have funded these funds or have refused to pay the appropriate taxes are now paying directly to the agencies involved.
Some of our efforts that have yielded returns to government were monies that we successfully stopped from leaving government account. So, for example, we do investigation, we find out that an agency has requested in the budget money that it does not require.
Away from that, 48 new COVID-19 infections have been recorded nationwide within the last 24 hours, bringing the country's total confirmed cases to 166,146. The Nigeria Center for Disease Control, NCDC, records show that among the new infections, Lagos has 22, Rivers and Enugu have 11 cases each, Kaduna 2, while FCT and Gombe recorded 1 new case apiece. Active cases nationwide stand at 7,499. Total discharged cases so far are 156,529, while the death toll remains 2,071. Happy Children's Day.
Recently, both the President and Vice President demonstrated leadership by being among the first Nigerians to have the AstraZeneca vaccine administered to them on live TV for all in the country to see. Subsequently, many federal ministers, political leaders, and members of the Presidential COVID-19 Task Force have publicly taken the vaccine to follow in the footsteps of President Buhari and Vice President Oshibaja. To obtain it yourself, please go to the NPHCDA website. There is a link to click on in order to register and schedule your vaccination. In the meantime, please continue to wear face masks, wash your hands frequently, use hand sanitizer, and observe social distancing. This message was brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
You fit to do anything with the number 444. Yeah, I know the song. Do you know the song? Let's go and see if they know the song. Let's give this show voice of the street. You fit to do anything with the number 444. Everything easy, no long thing, no. 444. Hey, no this kaka your dada, oh. Hey, I beg you, get the number 444. Ọ̀rẹ́ mi máa lọ fọ́. Hey, that's the 4 is the 444 0404. 4 meta is a metaphor. Let's go. Anything you want, no matter you do.
To watch amazing performances, you guys should tune in to The Voice Nigeria, connected by Airtel.
Airtel, the smartphone network.
The Sports Parliament, your weekly sports program, is back to the studio every Thursday, 10:30 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. live on the Nigerian Television Authority, Africa's largest television network. Watch out for the parliamentarians with renewed vigor and zest. Mr. Speaker with his gavel to harmonize sports resolutions. Sports Parliament, a must watch. Sports Parliament, the home of sports verdict. The highs have it.
We thank you for staying with us on Good Morning Nigeria. And up next is business news. Federal government facilitates easy takeoff of Nigeria COVID-19 Action Recovery and Economic Stimulus CARES program at the subnational levels. Let's now join Kunle Adeye for details of that package.
40 operational vehicles for the smooth takeoff of the program have been presented to state coordinators of the program to enable them perform their responsibilities effectively before the commencement of the program in June 2021. Minister of State Budget and National Planning, Clem Agba, who took delivery of the vehicles from the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development, Sadia Umaru Farouk, emphasized that the multi-sectoral program is designed to provide immediate emergency relief to the vulnerable and smallholder farmers, as well as small and medium enterprises that are affected by COVID-19 using the World Bank's $750 million loan.
The program is an emergency one to be driven and implemented by the 36 states and the Federal Capital Territory. The intervention allocation to each state is $20 million and $15 million to the Federal Capital Territory.
There's no doubt that this intervention will impact on the beneficiaries as well as contribute to the rebuilding of the economy and prosperity in Nigeria.
The program will last for 2 years. And to the details of Wednesday's trends on the floor of the exchange. With business news, I'm Kunle Adeye.
Many thanks, Kunle, for the business package. Coming up next on the program is newspaper review.
Okay, now time for newspaper review. Bayo is not here today again, so Kinsley and I will be doing today's review. And let's begin with the Nation newspaper. The Nation newspaper, above the nameplate, Sultan laments inaction on security plans. Only politicians can't go home. The stories on page 4. Scores feared killed in Kebbi ferry accident. President sad. The story is also on page 4. Naira crashes to 493 naira per dollar in parallel market. Troops bust Boko Haram warehouse in Yobe. The story is on pages 4 and 2. Now, the lead story this morning on the Nation newspaper, Constitution, State Police, Power Devolution, top talks. With riders, settler indigenship request in Plateau, Gombe, Borno, Yobe reject State Police. North, South, Kaduna asks for different states. Lagos seeks special status. All right. Here, Buhari not against open grazing ban, says the presidency. Story is on page 4. Now, at the foot of the Nation newspaper, why NYSC should not be scrapped by federal government is on page 3. Bread price to go up. It's on page 25 of the Nation newspaper. Kinsley.
All right, Kieran, the story you read about the boat mishap in Kebbi is the lead for the Daily Trust newspaper. And the Daily Trust says 154 feared dead in Kebbi boat mishap. And there are 4 riders to that, 180 on board. Accident caused by overloading, that's according to NIWA, which is the Inland Waterways Authority. Local divers on rescue mission. And President Buhari, of course, is quoted there saying that the mishap is devastating. And you can see the photographs on the front page there of the first responders evacuating dead bodies after the boat capsized yesterday in Kebbi. Perhaps there's more details about the incident that occurred. Now, the incident is said to have happened in Ngaski local government area of Kebbi, and this was at about 10 in the morning yesterday. And that apart from the persons who were on board, the wooden boat, you said a ferry, but this was I say the boat. I was just wondering how a wooden boat can convey 180 people on that waterway, and then also had on it bags of sand for gold miners, as well as motorcycles and other equipment, as the locals were heading to a local market. As I said here, the boat had some 30 motorcycles, and it's pretty sad that this incident has occurred. And if nearly 24 hours later they haven't been able to rescue any more of the persons who were on board that infected boat or ferry, then obviously this probably would not be a salvage mission, Kieran.
See, it's simply overloading. That's just the question. And again, who should be responsible for determining the extent of load that a boat or ferry or whatever it is can have at a particular point in time? Now it's about 10 o'clock in the morning. Perhaps people are going to their various businesses, different locations of Kebbi State, and look at what has happened. All right, and it also serves as a lesson to other persons, not just the boat, but even vehicles are pretty overloaded, and it's common sense, Kingsley. I mean, you should be able to know what you can take and what you cannot take.
You cannot take. That's the report here by Daily Trust is quoting the area manager of NIWA, who is at Yauri in Kebbi State, Yusuf Burma, saying that overloading was the most likely cause of the accident, and that the boat itself is weak. In his words, the boat involved is a wooden boat which is old and very weak. But these people will not listen when we speak to them to reduce the number of passengers they carry.
The passengers themselves. You want to board a boat and you know that it's overloaded and you're a passenger, nobody forced you into the boat.
Absolutely,
nobody forced you.
Absolutely.
Sometimes we're in a hurry to get to where we want to get. Everybody's in a hurry right now. And we just got into the boat knowing full well that it's overloaded.
Yeah, but it requires a great deal of public enlightenment amongst the locals who use the waterways as their access routes to various locations that they get to. This is a big loss. Over 150 persons, who have passed on. Let's take a look at the other headlines. Above the lead story, but below the nameplate, says Constitution Review, discordant tunes as governors unveil agenda. That's page 32. Bakers hike bread and biscuits prices by 30% nationwide. Soldiers chase EFCC operatives from marking ONSA directors' forfeited assets. That ONSA stands for Office of National Security Advisor. You have details of that on page 29. And then other headlines on the front page, 100 students collapse after inhaling fumigation chemicals in Ekiti. Don't legalize cannabis, NDLEA cautions lawmakers. Kira, you recall we discussed this. I don't know whether you and I were on set. Maybe it was Bayo who was around. There was an announcement by the spokesperson of the House of Reps, Honorable Benjamin Kalu, that the House would take steps to legalize cannabis because of the medicinal uses to which cannabis is being put, on the one hand, in advanced countries and other derivatives from cannabis itself. And this is not to say you're legalizing it for everyone to be puffing on the street, but to seek to maximize the economic benefits from that. But the NDLEA chairman, retired Brigadier General Buba Marwa, is saying if you did, then of course you'll be having many junkies all over the place.
Well, the medicinal value of marijuana, it could be tapped, intelligently. In other climes, like in America, in some states in America, it's legalized. Some of them have also been, formed into medications that you can buy off the shelf, right? If you have the prescription to buy them. So we can make use of that positively, but not necessarily to allow people to puff on the street, freely and stuff like that.
I recall saying on that occasion that as part of what Honorable Benjamin Kalu said, that there are many more uses of Indian hemp, as it is called, other than just smoking and getting mad. It's used in the cosmetics industry, for instance.
Exactly.
It's also used in the pharmaceutical industry.
Exactly.
And the key point is as follows. If it has been legalized in other jurisdictions, and those jurisdictions where it has been legalized, and they are sourcing for it, again, the point to be made is, I understand, I've never tested it, that the cannabis we have around in a part of the world is very potent. So how do you regulate the cultivation, and marketing and export of this particular product? Let's face it. I mean, cannabis
licensing.
That's right.
Licensing,
That's right.
You
can get them organized to say that it's prohibited. So just do away with it. If there are economic benefits, you get around it. It's a controlled substance.
Exactly.
Yes.
In Nigeria, the difficulty in controlling it will be it will hit us, so negatively, because many youths in this country will go for it. I mean, even today in Nigeria, in some places, you see people smoking their hemp freely till date.
Well, Kira, I think maybe a differentiation. I mean, I'm not an advocate of Indian hemp, by the way, but I'm just saying a differentiation could be made for the cultivation and marketing, cultivation and sale, for industrial purposes, versus smoking. There is a subsisting ban on smoking in public places in the country, to say that you can retain the ban on the consumption of cannabis by way of smoking in public. As I said, it's just for the economic argument that has come up. Let's take a look at the other headlines very quickly. Children's Day, many questions, few answers on children's rights. Today is Children's Day, and of course that was a day that the administration of General Yakubu Gowon initiated as part of the ways of recognizing the value of children in our society. Buhari raises alarm, says insecurity rocking Nigeria's foundation. 3 riders to that headline. Enough of talks without action. That's according to the Sultan. We are at a crossroads, as Senate President Lawan, our country under attack. Bajabiamila, Speaker of the House.
Kisli, on this issue of insecurity, a lot has been said. We've been talking. I watched the Oni of Ife, making his own contribution yesterday, and he made it so clear that it will be, well, permitting to use that word, it will be idiotic, for us to be assembling ourselves, discussing one item year after year, and no action is taken. Right, and he made it clear that if we continue to rigmarole, on this matter, then the issue of insecurity will rise. There's no action, that is commensurate with the level of crime that is being committed in this country on a daily basis. Right. So the idea is that some persons have also said that, look, if the police cannot investigate and find out the root cause of even the most current one, which is burning down police stations, killing police personnel, then the country is doomed. If the police cannot do that, to find out those responsible for burning down police stations and attacking policemen themselves, and if policemen are attacked, like we said yesterday, it's an attack on the nation.
That's true.
That's
true. And as we also cited a report by This Day on Sunday, in 4 months, the country has lost 340 security personnel to armed attacks.
When we are also under-policed, and we are losing the ones that are already in service.
already in service. It's a pertinent point. I think that what His Majesty, the Oni of Ife, raised is also a very valuable issue. Sometimes, if not most of the time, everything is just about talking.
Having seminars, conferences.
Seminars, workshops. What are the action points? And if there are action points, who is supposed to take the action and when? We never return to this. I made mention of some conference that, it was a summit also, 20 years ago at the International Conference Center, ahead of the 2003 general elections. It was a conference on security, to avert political crisis,
thuggery,
and so on and so forth, because there were a lot of assassinations at the time that were going on. The conference took place, I remember, 2001. But go and check the amount of bloodletting that went on after that particular summit. And then, of course, throughout the 2003 elections. We cannot just be talking all the time. Sometimes we are unable to, Kirian, return to the resolutions and recommendations of previous gatherings, whether summits, conferences, workshops. So every person comes, it's like a tabula rasa.
Exactly, and people make money out of it too. For instance, look at what's going on.
I wouldn't know, Kira, but
the idea is that by the time you bring people together, money is being expended. There are no two ways about it. You pay for their flight tickets, you pay for their hotel accommodation, you pay allowances for all those conversations that they're going to have for days. After that, everything is packaged, excluded, and kept to the shelf.
And then sometimes I mean, I've witnessed a number of these gatherings. Sometimes the procedure is just academic. Somebody will tell you root causes of insecurity. Then you will be atomizing the issues.
That's a lecture.
Why have we failed, as you have said, why have we failed to fully grasp or understand what is happening in the Southeast?
Unknown gunmen.
What is an unknown gunman?
It's not understandable.
I don't know. If it's a matter of procuring, equipment, why have we failed to procure the right equipment? In an age of ICT, or who should we go to get the equipment for us?
You can even apply CCTV in all police stations in this country. So that we begin to track those elements who are responsible for this.
Yeah, so they finish talking, everybody goes home, and then you don't watch out in the media. 2-3 weeks later, you'll be seeing reports again of more incidents of crime and criminality. In the meantime, those who are protecting VIPs, their numbers have increased, obviously, because of the level of insecurity. They want to go from here to their washroom, now a security man will follow them. They want to go from here to their in-laws' place, a security person will follow them. And it doesn't help.
It doesn't help.
Kieran, one other point, if you recall yesterday, you want to go to another, we raised this issue yesterday about the Ibori assets that have been recovered from the UK. And, you know, the Accountant General of the Federation was reported as saying before a House committee that the money had now been credited to the Delta State government's account. Delta State government is saying it hasn't received the money. The headline is there on page 5 of Daily Trust. Says £4.2 million Ibori loot not yet returned to Delta, and that's Accountant General recounting. It says there are still some processes to work out.
Exactly. Now, look at this issue of constitutional review. You know, issues arising. State police, power devolution, top talks, you know, and then different states have different opinions to that. Plateau, Gombe, Borno, Yobe reject state police. The North, the South, Kaduna asks for different states. Lagos seeks special status. You know, this constitutional review, Kingsley, in my opinion, you know, could be another round of talks that maybe perhaps at some point articulated and implemented. implemented. We had a such conference, you know, in 2014, you know, when a good number of well-meaning Nigerians were gathered together here in Abuja and they deliberated on this country and issues concerning insecurity and what have you. Today, what has been articulated is now in the shelf. Nobody is addressing it. I don't know, this issue of a constitutional review, how far it will take this nation in terms of resolving some of the issues. And we have had discussions on this program where we say, look, that the law is not the problem, but it is the implementation of the law. Not necessarily that we don't have laws in this country, but how do we get these laws implemented? At point of implementation, we fail most of the time.
Well, Kirian, the point you made is noted. We raised this with the chairman of the Senate Committee on Media while we were discussing the issues around the constitutional review. He said, he joined us via Zoom from Osogbo, that what they have done is to synthesize the recommendations and reports from a plethora of previous efforts. And then, of course, they have distilled them, they have that. But my point was, I mean, when I was seeking to interrogate the issue for that was, if you have done that, then why is it that in the public hearing that the Senate is organizing in the geopolitical zones, you now expect people to bring their memoranda fresh? We could very well have had an executive summary, just a 2-page document, not more, no more. You say, look, this is what we have distilled from, including the one you just talked about, the 2014 National Constitutional Conference, and all others. The National Assembly itself, Ekweremadu had previously headed one in one of the previous exercises. All of them, just distill them and say, these are the matters that we want to focus on at this time. If your matter is here, don't raise it. If it is not here, raise it. So that you don't have all these papers that will now be submitted. You'll be applying through them. Like what the governor of Lagos State said, create a special economic status for Lagos. The governor is restating the point that has been on the table for a long period of time.
Exactly.
You know, so that we don't keep, as you say, we don't keep going back and forth. Before you know it, it's 2022, and then everybody will be saying
election,
party primaries, party primaries, which is what the editorial of the Punch is referring to at page 22. It says, eliminating threats to the 2023 elections. It's drawing attention to the fact that a critical document relating to the conduct of the elections are coming up in less than 20 months' time, and to say, look, are we working on reforming the Electoral Act?
And besides that, so many INEC offices have been burnt down in all parts of the country. More than 400 of them have been burned down in all parts of the country, and it is still continuing. So how prepared are we?
Not up to 400.
It is up to 4. If you check it,
they didn't start today.
It didn't start recently.
No,
it didn't start now.
Kieran, let's not 24. 24. Unless you are
the
aware.
current ones we're talking about. There are previous ones before now.
That's true.
Exactly.
That's true. But certainly, even if it is one, it's costly to replace.
Exactly.
That's right.
So it's only costly to replace not just the infrastructure. The structure, the building per se. All of the card readers,
the documents and other equipment that they need to use there. So, Kieran, I think we call it time on Newspaper Review this morning. And of course, we're going to take a short break now. When we return, we'll go ahead with our principal item for discussion this morning.
Dialogue, empathy, love, and unity. These are vital components of nation building.
For all to be well, we appeal that we should refrain from volatile, provocative, inciting messages and language.
Let's build and not destroy.
Dear customer, link your Airtel number to your national identification number today. Here are easy ways you can do it. Dial *121*1# on your Airtel line and follow the prompts on the screen. Type in your 11-digit government-approved NIN number. You will receive a confirmation message to confirm your entry. You can also visit www.airtel.com.ng/NIN to link your phone number to your NIN. If you do not know your NIN, simply dial *346# to get it. No stress, no wahala.
Airtel, the smartphone network.
Son, being good at something requires strength. It requires putting in more. That's why the new improved Bonvita is packed with vitality and a richer, creamier taste.
Revision classes on television for students in secondary schools in English and mathematics will commence on the NTA. The revision classes will transmit Mondays to Fridays from 5 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. on the network service of the NTA. This is organized in preparation for the various national examinations and orders. This is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Education.
As Oni of Ife, as someone who cares about the well-being and safety of our people, it's time for each and every one of us to realize that COVID-19 is real and it has killed millions of people around the world. Scientists have developed this vaccine. The vaccine is safe for everyone and it contains no microchip, nor can it alter our DNA. However, we must continue to stay safe and stay clean, wear face masks, clean our hands on a regular basis, and try as much as possible to avoid a very large crowd and gathering. For those who choose to be vaccinated, it will go a long way in protecting yourself and your loved ones from COVID-19.
This is Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. Before our conversation starts on solutions to farmers, herders, clashes in Nigeria, let's take this background report by Joseph Ozen.
With veterinary clinics, water points for animals, and facilities for herders and their families, including schooling, through these rehabilitated reserves, the federal government is making far-reaching and practical changes, allowing for different communities to coexist side by side, supporting farmers to till their fields, herders to rear their livestock, and Nigerians everywhere to be safe. These are words of President Muhammadu Buhari captured in a press statement issued by the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Media and Publicity, Garba Shehu, as he approves establishment of ranches and revival of forest reserves to curb frequent clashes between herders and farmers in parts of the country. These crises have continued to consume lives and displaced many, threatening food security of the country due to neglect of farmlands and destruction of crops. Many communities have also become hostile to the herders who they accuse of flooding their farmlands with cattle to eat up crops. Several engagements between stakeholders towards finding lasting solutions have not yielded much desired results as clashes continue to ravage communities. On the 21st of May 2021, the Southern Governors Forum met in Asaba, Delta State and declared a ban on open grazing to improve security. The decision of the Southern Governors gives credence to earlier enacted Benue State Open Grazing Prohibition and Ranches Establishment Law 2017. Though some court rulings are giving backing to the decisions of some of the governors, the Attorney General of the Federation, Abubakar Malami, recently disagreed with the stand of the Southern Governors, stating it does not align with the provision of the Constitution, citing freedom of the citizen to live and operate in any part of the country. The approval given by President Muhammadu Buhari for the establishment of ranches and revival of forest reserves across the country tells how much the president is concerned over sustainable and lasting solutions to the herders-farmers crisis. The laws, programs, and recommendations have all been subjected to questions and criticism. What then is the solution to the herders-farmers crisis? This question and other related matters are what guests on Good Morning Nigeria are waiting to discuss soon.
Thank you very much, Joseph Olsen, for that backgrounder. With us in the Abuja studios now, I would like to welcome Dr. Saleh Momale, who is the technical advisor to the Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development. Dr. Momale, pleasure to have you this morning.
Thank you very much, and good morning, Nigerians.
And joining us from our Enugu Network Center is a regular guest on Good Morning Nigeria, Executive Secretary, Agricultural Research Council of Nigeria, Professor Hamisu Shaributu. Professor Shaributu, delighted to have you this morning.
And Kirian, good morning, Nigerians.
And from our Benin studio, we have a Professor of Wildlife Management, Professor Gideon Emelwe, Department of Forest Resources and Wildlife Management, Faculty of Agriculture, Science University of Benin. Sir, you're also welcome to the program.
Good morning, Nigerians.
All right, gentlemen, let's get to the heart of the matter with Dr. Saleh Momale. Dr. Momale, well, latest reports have indicated that there is a new game plan to ensure that the perennial clashes between farmers and herdsmen and the associated criminality are brought, those clashes and the associated criminality are brought to a halt. What is this new game plan?
Thank you very much, and good morning, Nigerians, once again. Like you rightly observe, and also in the background report, this has been an issue and a challenge that has been facing this country over the past decade, 3 decades or even more. And several approaches and many solutions have been proffered. However, the situation has escalated in the past 1.5 decades, due largely to the inability of local institutions to deal with some of the challenges, as well as the growing spate of insecurity generally in the country. Again, the growing narratives and occasional politicization of some of these issues have made its publicity widespread and has also raised embers that has not helped in resolving the crisis. Basically, what the federal government is up and doing now is to take a 3-pronged approach. First, to engage with the relevant institutions, with the relevant stakeholders, and with the relevant communities. Open up dialogue and strengthen local institutions that will be able to handle effectively the issues of administration of resource governance in such a way that simple disputes, disagreements, and local conventions can be grown or can be developed to address some of these problems in the interim. At the second level is to prompt up actions at the federal level in collaboration with the state governments that will result to the rapid transformation in the livestock production system through the development and provision of requisite infrastructure, massive training and capacity development that will ultimately lead to the complete overhaul of the traditional system of livestock production, which is dependent on animals freely moving from one place to another in search of feeds and water. And this will be addressed by providing the needed capacity and infrastructure for the producers to produce the feeds that is needed for their livestock, while the government provides support in infrastructure such as water and skills, as well as financial services that will enable these producers to invest in the productive resources that will be able to provide the needed feeds and water that is required. At the third level is to prompt rapid private sector investments in this sector, and this will cover the critical areas of service delivery. For example, promoting the emergence of companies or firms that will be able to produce alternative feed resources for livestock, as we have seen in the poultry sector, which has driven the development of that sector. Again, we want to see the professionals, particularly in the veterinary services, prompting up private sector veterinary service delivery, and then vamping up what we call the extension service system in such a way that private extension services and more modern and robust extension service delivery mechanisms exploiting the current developments in technology are deployed also not only in the livestock sector but also other aspects of the agricultural sector. Again, we are rapidly promoting backward integration by organizing and supporting large-scale private sector investments, particularly in the dairy and beef sectors, to come into the country through direct foreign investments, as well as the indigenous or those existing multinational companies like Friesland Campino, like many of these companies that we have engaged in the dairy value chain to also make rapid and huge investments in the sector to promote, the backward integration across the entire value chain of both the beef and the dairy sectors. We do believe that the first approach of rapid engagements working with traditional institutions, working with the stakeholders, the local government administrations, as well as the states, will douse many of the ongoing challenges that we do have at the moment in terms of the management of community resources that will be able to address the day-to-day grievances and challenges that exist. Because even if you want to stop, like the southern governors are saying, ban open grazing, it cannot take place over a day or over a month. The reason is because livestock have life. They are creatures that have life. They must feed, they must have water. So even if you ban grazing, it means those animals must be fed and they must have water to drink. And unless you have alternative mechanisms for feeding those live animals and giving them water, you cannot confine them because they will die. And these are natural creatures that we have a responsibility as humans to preserve them as creatures of God. So this is fundamental. So it's very difficult, it's a challenging issue, and it is something that we must take pragmatic actions and programs over time, scaling up each activity and then giving a time frame within which we will develop the mechanisms and alternative systems of feeding that will be able to take care of this. And this is why this three-pronged approach is being developed, and we are going to pursue its implementation vigorously in the forthcoming months, and subsequently leading to the implementation of the National Livestock Transformation Plan, which ultimately will lead to the sustainable transformation of the livestock production system, and then the development of viable ranches all over the country, throughout particularly many of the savanna, the Guinea savanna, the Sudan savanna, and the more southern parts of this country. Where we will have a challenge over time is mostly the few Sahelian parts of this country, which are drier and where the development of ranches will require huge capital investments in terms of getting access to water. So in these regions, we do know that most probably the traditional system may continue over a longer period of time, but we believe that once the savanna, the Sudan savanna, the Guinea savanna, and the southern, the forest zones of Nigeria are able to develop this system, it will ultimately provide the needed capital that will lead to the investment in the fewer Sahelian parts of this country, where also the complete transformation will ultimately take place over time.
All right, Dr. Momale, well spoken. But look, this is not the first time that this administration has mooted the idea of transforming the livestock sector. It's always been there. But what has happened in the past is that no proper engagement has been established. For instance, you said first engagement is to engage the local institutions. What are these institutions? You also talked about prompt of actions in collaboration with state governors, the development of infrastructure, and of course prompt rapid private sector investment and all of that. These are beautiful and well articulated plans. Sir, when will this implementation start? And the engagement you talked about at local level, whom are you engaging? Is it the traditional rulers? Is it state governors? Some of whom have also made clear what they want in their states with respect to banning of open grazing. So how will this come to be? Because we want to see a proper implementation of this very beautiful articulation of ideas aimed at transforming the livestock sector.
Thank you very much. This is not to assume, for example, that many of these initiatives have not been ongoing. And also, if you look at the country at large, we can see that substantial progress has already been made in many states. We will all agree the intensity and scale of these conflicts have significantly reduced in many states, if you take, for example. And again, it also depends on the dynamism and the level of proactiveness of the states and local institutions, like I earlier said. If we take, for example, states like Adamawa, like Nasarawa, like Plateau, where some of these conflicts have been very endemic in the previous decade, you can see a significant de-escalation of conflicts in these states. And the reason is because those local institutions and the state government have come together and have been working with the relevant stakeholders. Now, coming back to the point you make, some of the most important stakeholders at the local level whose participation will be enhanced by the proactiveness of the state governments are the traditional institutions, the religious leaders, and often the community-based institutions. I mean, the community-based organizations, the social groupings, the women organizations, the peace-building networks, and of course, many of our international peace-building organizations that have been working in many of these areas. So what we are doing now is to prompt up all of this and come back with a collaborative framework of working together to enhance the successes that we have achieved in many of these states. And then to scale it up to those states where we are having some of the current challenges. Again, I have to make it very categorically clear here that many of the conflicts, many of the issues today we are ascribing as farmer-herder conflicts are actually other forms of crisis, particularly the growing insecurity. And one of the things that has happened in the recent years, again, often driven by political considerations, is the ethnicization of some of these conflicts, which we have repeatedly said is very dangerous. Crime, once you assign or once you associate criminal activities with either ethnicity, socioeconomic activities, or religion, you will end up fighting those religions or those identities while allowing the crime to boomerang. Organized crime always involves very delicate networks that only detailed and careful security analysis will be able to unravel the actors. For example, you can have, those that carry out the arms out there in the field, but there are many other actors that drives these criminal syndicates. So the more we allow our security institutions, the more we cooperate, the more we take these challenges as national challenges, and the less we emphasize some of these divisive narratives, the better we are able to manage some of these crises. So some of these issues we ascribe as farmer-herder conflicts are actually issues that are beyond just farmers and pastoralists. They are issues that are related to the challenges of security in this country. So
all right.
Our challenge now
Dr.
is to try...
Dr. Momale, let's pause you in the meantime, because we have the other guests. We'll return to you in the course of the conversation. Let's bring in Professor Hamisu Shaributu, who is at our Enugu Network Center. Professor Shaributu, you listened to the technical advisor to the Honorable Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development, and what is the new game plan. What are your thoughts on the issues that he has outlined? Is it a case of old wine in new skin, or is fresh wine in fresh skin?
Well, thank you very much. I think this time around is the energization of the old wine in the old skin, trying as much as possible to see how we will put life into the long-standing solutions that has been proposed. But first of all, let me say this, that we need to understand some things. Just like he mentioned, there's the issue of farmer-herders clash, and there's the issue of criminality that has crept into this concept. That is one. The second thing there is the issue of grazing reserve and the issue of forest reserves. These are, again, two different things under two different institutions. While the grazing reserve concept is under the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, the issue of forest reserve is under the confines of the Federal Ministry of Environment. Now, when you talk about sensitization, there must be a time frame to sensitize the stakeholders. And Nigeria is replete with this experience. Let us take, for example, when the NYSC program was being proposed by the Gowon regime, everybody knows the level of resistance that has been met. Now, just recently, the coronavirus situation is that many people did not even believe that this thing comes. Now, for those of us that are in extension, we know that there is a pyramid of adoption, that is pyramid of understanding. And the pyramid starts with innovators and it ends with laggards. But the Nigerian situation is such that there are those we label impossible or antagonists. Now, this is a different bar altogether created. Now, what do I mean by that? You cannot continue to remain in a stagnant position trying to convince stakeholders year in, year out. This situation did not start today. We started as far back as 1964. And every time we come up and say we want to sensitize stakeholders first, it is good to sensitize stakeholders, but it is also good to tell stakeholders that this is the time to take action. We have spent a lot of time trying to convince the pastoralists there's a need for them to settle. And up to now, we have not succeeded. Now, the delay in getting them convinced has now introduced another dimension where there is resistance on the part of other non-pastorally tribes. And of course, some government officials now coming in. So I want to say that the step that is being taken now with the endorsement of Mr. President is the right place to go. Because, and let us have a time frame within which this program will be implemented. I think the key thing there is for us to have a time frame. And you see, we learn from reciprocal colleagues. A state government that initiates an action, is an innovator. But there are other people that the early majority that will actually come into it and begin to see the benefit of what is happening in another state and key into it. But if we continue to run in circle, just like Kingsley was saying in his introduction, we continue to move in circle, I can tell you that we are not going anywhere. We are so happy within the agricultural sector, very, very happy, because it is now time for action. And I think that there is a need for us to plead with other stakeholders like the governors, like the local government chairmen, to begin to key into this beautiful program. I think this is where we have to start. Enough of rigmaroling, proposing and counter-proposing, setting up of committees upon committees, begging, sensitization. I think there is a need for us to start, just like Mr. President has shown his willingness. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. One point I would like to take home here is the fact that he's talked about to convince the pastoralists to understand that the game has to change. That's a very key point, because with all these beautiful plans, if the pastoralists are not in agreement with you, are not prepared to, of course, adhere to what has been laid down, then all the efforts would have been in vain. Right, so thank you indeed. Let's go to Professor Gideon Emelue, Department of Forest Resources and Wildlife Management, Faculty of Agriculture, University of Science, University of Benin. So you've listened to Dr. Omale and, of course, the last speaker. But I want you to make reference to what Dr. Omale laid out as the master plan being put in place by the Ministry of Agriculture and, of course, the presidency to address this very perennial issue in this country. What are your views?
Thank you, Nigerians. I've listened keenly to all the issues that are being canvassed. I want to say that we have been hearing this for a very long time. And as we have been hearing it, it seems as if there is much talk, no action. And the people in the field, the farmers, other users of land use, they have been passing through a lot. I think whatever thing anybody is saying, whether the state government, whether the president, they don't seem to be new. The greatest issue is how to take off. How do we solve the problem? We are talking about time frame, when to do this, when to start the ranching and all that. Somebody is bearing the brunt in the state at the community level. How do we ensure? Are we keeping that static? So we should remember that in agriculture, we have livestock, we have arable farms, we have forests and the likes. And what is going on this issue has been on for a long time. We cannot continue to do one thing continuously. I remember I'm from an agrarian area. We used to have cows, native cows. It got up to a stage, the native cows were dealing with the crops behind the farm, at the meadow, at the far farm. And the communities, they took decision in Delta State that all the cows should go, they should be banned. And that is what they are keeping till today. And unfortunately, we have now discovered that the other cows now come in to replace the native cows. It didn't take long for that ban to take place, and every other person had to adjust. So I think from my own view, in Nigeria, the dominant vegetation we have is the rainforest, the savanna area largely, and we have states that are associated with rearing of cows, rearing of rams, rearing of all the likes. And so for me, the first thing to do is a ban. When there is an action, when there is action that is adverse, the first thing you do is to take an action to stop that from going on. For years, we have been talking about this. We have been talking about this. We've been talking about cattle routes. We've been talking about grazing reserve. They don't seem to be very realistic any longer. So there is need to back up what the certain state governors have done. That's the most practical step that will help to make sure that at least, let us see where we go from there. If we are going to, for me, I tip ranching. Ranching seems to be the best for now. There are countries like Botswana, South Africa, Mozambique, Ethiopia. I don't know how long it took them before they took practical steps. So my thought is that this is the time to start because the conflict is getting much. Ordinarily, we know that taking cows from one place to the other, an open grazing style, it doesn't work. What are you actually looking for? You are looking for food, you are looking for water. Can this thing be provided around? It's possible. When you say you want to engage those who carry the cows with the communities, and who actually are you dealing with? Are you dealing with a driver or you are dealing with the owner of the motor? Who are you dealing with? Who are the owners of the cows? Up till now, we don't know. If there is an accident and some people die, we should expect that the owner of the motor should be talking about compensation. But in this case, the farmers have been at the losing end and nobody is coming out. Is it the federal government that is paying them? Is it the state government that is paying them? So the issue of security, in fact, as of now, the thing is aggravating more and more. Because even the cow rearers themselves, they are meeting up with issues and problems they have never expected. They have the issue of rustling, and they need people to walk along with them to guide them. I see, so there is conflict of interest, and there is need for us to begin to implement. This issue of moratorium, I don't seem to buy it at all, because we have places in Nigeria where the grass is abundant. Let them start from that side. Leave the certain side where they are used to growing crops and all that. Thank you so much for now.
Professor Gideon Emelwe, thank you very much for your opening comments. I'm sure Dr. Momale, of course, will reply to some of the things that you have said. But while Professor Shaributu was speaking, he touched on a very important point, and I would like you to speak to this. It says, look, there is the issue of grazing reserves. There is also the issue of forest reserves. I was reading some of the statements that have been issued recently with regard to the new game plan by the federal government to terminate the farmers' herders clashes. And one point, I don't know whether it was a nomenclatural, misapplication, but they said they were going to revive. They were going to revive forest reserves. I would like you to speak to this so that we know what is the difference between grazing reserves and forest reserves. I have some experience with the forest. I don't know how you can revive those ones in a number of a few years. Tell us, Prof.
Thank you. When you talk about forest reserve, we are talking about area that is reserved, delineated, gazetted for the purpose of either for timber products or for taking care of area where we have rivers and all that. But the main thing is that it's for forest production. There is the major issue at stake is to produce goods and services that are associated with the forest. That's what a forest reserve is. Strictly, forest reserve is under the purview of the state government. We do not have federal forest reserve, and we can never have that because of the federal system of government. The state governors are the ones that take care of the forest. So the forest is more or less like a reservoir where the products and services associated with the forest reserve are perpetuated or managed. Now, when we talk about grazing reserve is an area that is strictly reserved to take care of grazers, that is animals like cows and the rest. I think what the president may be talking about is that early stage where they had a grazing reserve. They had something like that so many years ago. They had cattle route many, many years ago. Unfortunately, if I can still go back to history, from research, most of those grazing reserves were never used at all. I don't believe that the grazing reserve they're talking about is national park, because the national park is another entity again that where the wild animals are managed, where they are conserved for the services and products. I don't believe that is what they are trying to say. But I want to state from the onset that whichever way you want to look at it, the grazing reserve is still the state. You still have to carry the state along for you to be reviving any grazing reserve. Most of those reserves are nowhere. You've just heard about them. Most of them have been overtaken by population, by maybe airports and the rest. That is where we are.
Thank you. Back to the studio here, Dr. Momale. I know you would like to respond to some of the issues that they raised, but in addition to that, we would like you also to let us know the mechanism for the actualization of the collaborative framework you earlier talked about. You know, this time around, we're talking about implementation of whatever policy that has been articulated between the Ministry of Agriculture and, of course, the presidency, because as we have all been told, that this is the time to address this issue head on.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe I'll just start from just the last comment with respect to the revitalization of the grazing reserves and the forest reserves that was mentioned. Forest reserves, everybody knows, they are enclosures or areas that, like he said, protected by law, where certain things are restricted. For example, every one of us knows that the rules of a forest reserve is that no cutting of trees, no hunting of animals, no burning of bush, no farming, no grazing. These are simple rules, and the purpose is nature conservation. And like you said, apart from forest reserves that conserve trees, vegetation, and the natural ecology and protects our wildlife, we also have our national parks, which are very more extensive areas also for the same purpose. Now, restricted use of forest is allowed in the forest reserves, not for commercial purpose, but maybe like a collection of wild fruits and things like that within the community norms. And the practice varies a little from one part of the country to another. In parts of northern Nigeria, for example, you even have community forest reserves, whereby local governments, communities can keep a particular area and protect it as a forest reserve. So the purpose for which Mr. President is interested in the revitalization of forest reserve is that they are critical in the management of our natural resources. They are critical in the restoration of our ecologies, and they are critical to the preservation of the agricultural resources of the country. So for us to conserve, maintain our agricultural resources, and ensure balance, we need not only focus on grazing reserves, but also on the forest reserves. This is for our national benefit. So it's not just about an issue for cattle or for conflicts, but also for the conservation and preservation of our critical national assets. And this is what we consider very important, And we do believe that we are going to work with the state governments, the Federal Ministry of Environment, to see which kind of support mechanisms can be devolved and supported to the states to ensure the preservation and restoration of many of our degraded forest reserves that have been neglected over these years. They are very critical, like I said, in preservation of our natural water sources, in the conservation of our soils, in the conservation of our biotic and abiotic resources. And this will, in the long run, enhance not only crop productivity, but also livestock productivity. And so this is what we are looking at. And there are many approaches and models of community-based forest management systems which will be deployed for that purpose. Coming back to the grazing reserves, again, this will be the central focus for the transformation of the livestock production system, for the development of infrastructure, and, like Professor Sharabutu said, moving away from the rhetorics to the practice, where we will bring in particularly the large herd owners, particularly those that are involved in mobility or migration from one place to another, provide them with the necessary requisite infrastructure, capacity and skills, and ramp up private sector participation in some of those areas to bring these people practically on ground, to begin to develop them and give them the capacity to first of all transform the production system, to begin to grow pasture, to begin to invest in provision of livestock for their own, water for their own livestock, and ultimately lead to the establishment of ranches. Again, I agree that the time frame is very important, and there is nothing that you can do without getting people's buy-in, without getting the buy-in of the local institutions, away from the rhetorics into practical actions. And this is why we are going to commence it immediately. We are going to start working with the state governments, our community institutions, and our local governments together, particularly in these areas where these grazing reserves exist and where the state governments are willing to participate and support these initiatives. The other challenges that have been mentioned, like Professor was saying, like I said, it's a matter of approach, it's a matter of understanding, it's a matter of perception as well. But the critical thing is that livestock, wherever they exist, are resources of those states. The livestock today in either the states of, for example, Rivers or Sokoto or Kebbi or Ogun, they are the resources of that particular state. The more the state harness those resources, develop those...
How do you mean? What,
yes.
What ownership theory is that?
What I mean is that whatever exists within your territory are resources that are owned by that particular territory. If you develop those resources, harness those resources, is for the collective good of that particular territory. That is basic. That is basic. For example, even if it is, for example, foreign investor that has come to Nigeria to invest resources, those resources are still for the benefit of Nigeria. So the more Nigerians are able to harness and benefit from those resources, the better. And this is the principle for which we are going to promote, to see how do we make each of these sections of the Nigerian society recognize that those resources that exist within their territories, if they are harnessed, they are for the better benefit of those particular territories. I give you an example. I give you an example.
I'm not pursuing you, but I want to just amplify, for you to amplify what you're saying. Now, you say that, for instance, in states, are you now saying, because I asked you about the mechanism for the actualization of the collaborative framework, are you going to involve states in establishing ranches in states of Nigeria, both in the north and southern part of Nigeria?
First of all, there is no intervention, there is no action that will be taken in any part of Nigeria without the participation of two critical stakeholders. I have already said that, the state governments and the local institutions. That has already been made very clear, and that is the framework we are going to adopt. The state governments and the institutions that exist where those particular resources are. For example, what I'm saying is, for example, if we go to Sokoto State, or if we go to Adamawa State, and there is a grazing reserve in a particular local government, and the first entry point is the state governments. Those grazing reserves are the property of the states. So if the state government said, yes, we are willing to develop X grazing reserve, then the next stage is the local institutions where those grazing reserves exist. What framework are we going to capitalize? We are going to make an assessment of that particular grazing reserve. What are the potentials? What are the resources? Who are the current users? Going into the details, for example, what are the existing potentials for development, and who are the stakeholders that will participate in that particular approach and in that particular intervention? This will be worked out with the local institutions, up with the state government. The role of the federal government is to become the catalyst to support and promote private sector investments in extension service delivery, in, for example, investment in beef and dairy production, in commercial pasture production, and possibly support in terms of infrastructure. That's the best the federal government can do.
Okay, Dr. Momale, thank you very much. Again, we still have some time, so we'll return to it. I was just curious about the ownership theory we're propounding.
Okay.
When you say livestock or it belongs to the state, I mean, that's a bit slightly challenging.
Okay,
it's slightly challenging. I'll tell you, from a legal point of view, when you're talking about property law, for instance, it is said, there's a maxim for it, quid plantator solo sedit. What is attached to the land belongs to the land. But if you have movables, such as livestock, I mean, if you decide to move their livestock from rivers into Edo State, it's no longer the property of rivers. Yeah. It becomes the property of Edo State. So you move it from Edo State, you take it to Kogi, it becomes property of Kogi. Exactly. So I mean, you have that kind of thing, but that's not really a substantive point. One issue that I would like Professor Shaributu to also speak about. Professor Hamisu Shaributu, well, all of these plans that have been outlined and for which you are calling for action, and indeed Professor Emilwe as well. Tell us, do we have a sense of numbers? Namely, how many livestock are we planning for? And for what period of time? For instance, I mean, if I were to ask, what is the population of cattle in Nigeria? What is the population of sheep in Nigeria? What is the population of goats in Nigeria, or donkeys, or camels? Do we have a sense of this? That's one. And then two, for whom are we planning? Because there is the ECOWAS protocol on transhumans. That's the same movement of human beings and livestock across the West African sub-region. The plans that have been outlined now so that we can more effectively deliver it once implementation starts. Do we know the population of the animals we're talking about? Do we know the population of human beings that are supposed to be engaged in the husbandry of this livestock?
Thank you very much, sir. Before I get to this very, very serious and concerning question that you have raised, let me say that there is a lot of misinformation out there. And this misinformation is responsible for this quick action that some of us are taking. Now, I thank Momale for explaining this issue of forest reserve. But the forest reserve, the way my colleague is seeing it, is not actually it. If you look at where criminality takes place, you will find out that they are associated with these densely populated forest areas. And that is the plan of the federal government. Criminals actually find their hidings in the forest areas. And because the forests are not manned security-wise, they now become available for criminals to stay there without being monitored. Anybody who is kidnapped in this country is taken to the forest. And I dare say that virtually nobody knows the terrain in that place. So one of the measures that will be taken is to try and see how the forest can actually be owned by the government. But for now, the forest is virtually owned by criminals. And that is where they stay. So part of the action is to ensure that the agro rangers are well trained in order for them to be able to take charge of the forest. And I'm telling you that it is not an easy means because geographical information system will be there. They have to do a mapping of that area. They have to understand the terrain, the movement. The rivers that are there must be understood so that anything that happens can easily be traced and actually nipped at the bud. Then the forest reserve issue. There's a misinformation about forest reserve, the forest reserve we have in this country. We have 415 identified. We have about 112 or 17, according to records, that have been developed so far. And people, pastoralist families, are staying there. Momale is one of the beneficiaries of the the grazing reserve in Kachia area. The Wawazenge in Bauchi, it leads up to the Wase. We have Bobi, we have Lata. All these grazing reserves have people there. The only thing we are complaining about there is that we have not been able to step up on the provisions that, the infrastructure that are supposed to be there. Now, this lack of concentration and developing the grazing reserves is what is pushing people. It's a push factor to push the pastoralists out of that place because they cannot stay without water and rest. So let us run away from the fact that these grazing reserves are not there. They are there, they are being utilized. And there are pastoralist families staying there. Now, coming to your question, which is very, very serious. We have a good statistics of the number of livestock that we have. We have about 20 million cattle. We have about 40 million sheep and goat. And we have other livestock. Now, the livestock transformation agenda is not just supposed to concentrate on cattle. Right now, as we are talking to you, there are state governments that have already initiated action to try and see what they can do. I can mention Niger State, that they have gone far in engaging private sector, international donor organizations, and they are working seriously on it. I know the case of Plateau State that have taken their own statistics. They are ready to get into it. Nasarawa have come up, and a lot of other states, like have been mentioned by Momale. So these statistics is none. Now, what are we targeting? We cannot target 20 million cattle at the same time. It is not possible. And that is the more reason why there is no need to rush into an action of categorically using the word ban. We can talk about encouraging zero grazing. When we encourage zero grazing, and that is, we need a census of the Fulani population or the pastoralist population that are resident in each of the states of the Federation. Like, for example, if you go to Ishain area in Oyo, let me tell you, it will be very, very difficult for anybody to come and say, Fulani people staying in Ishain, pack your things and go out. It will be very difficult to say, Lata Grazing Reserve, all the Fulani people, pack your things and go out. It is going to be very, very impossible. So what do? We are expected to understand the transformation concept and then domesticate them according to need. Like, for example, nothing stops the governor of Enugu State from understanding, what livestock provision are. Remember that there is no state in this country that does not have a Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development. There is no state that does not have a Department of Livestock. There are several livestock professionals in this state. I think that what we need to do is to be a bit technical about some of these things. Get whatever concept the federal government is talking about, get the policy of the federal government, call our technical people that are collecting salaries, they are there in the ministry, and ask them to look at this concept and try to see what they can do to domesticate. Because what we are saying there is, if we say ban this, it's going to be a problem. Like, for example, in the Middle Belt area, we're not talking about piggery. Of course, pig is livestock. We should be able to encourage pig production. We should be able to encourage sheep and goat production wherever they are predominant. So the whole policy is meant in such a way that every state government should be able to look at what they can do within the concept and try to see what they can encourage. Because, let me say this, let us not just identify cattle rearing to the Fulani people. Yes, predominantly they are, just like other traits. But I want to say this, that there is no law in this country that has stopped a typical plateau man from rearing livestock. And of course they are. There is nothing that stops an Igbo man from rearing livestock. Nothing stops a Yoruba person from rearing livestock. So let us not look at livestock production as the preclusive preserve of the Fulani people, or what I can call the non-pastoral and nomadic tribes. Let us try and see what we can do. But more so, I went to Gaiki in Enugu, and I was able to see the number of Igbo people that are participating In trade in cattle, go to Port Harcourt, you see so many Ikwere people, so many Ijo people that are participating in livestock trade. So there is a chain. There's a chain of productivity. There's a chain of engagement. There is employment provision in that area. And I think this is what the Honorable Minister is trying to see, that let us not abandon a ₦1 trillion investment, ₦1 trillion resources, just because we think that there is a problem. The problem must be solved, and this problem, like I said, must be solved by way of, coming together and trying to see whether we can understand what is happening in order to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Well stated, really, because the abandonment of that sector of our national life will be suicidal, if you ask me. And of course, what you have just propounded actually should be properly studied or analyzed by state governors and other stakeholders for us to to break even in that sector. I think the question Kinsley actually asked that had to do with the statistics of the cattle that we have in Nigeria is pertinent, because of the ECOWAS protocol. We have other areas coming from other parts of the region into Nigeria. From Mali, from Cameroon, from other parts of the region coming to Nigeria. And I don't know whether we have taken that into account, because of course if we are planning to have ranches or by the modern way of cattle rearing, whether those people are considered. These are some of the issues we're going to also talk when we return from this break. Let's take a short break. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. When we come back, the conversation continues. Don't go away.
Livestock Microfinance Bank wishes to inform the general public not to give money to anybody disguising as its staff or agent to secure the COVID-19 Targeted Credit Facility or AGS MEIS loan. However, a training fee is charged by Accredited Entrepreneurship Development Training Institute, EDIs, for the training and business plan for the AGS MEIS loan. Whenever you are in doubt, please call us at 0901 002 6905. If anyone has collected money to help you get the loan, please lodge a complaint on our whistleblowing portal by sending us an email on whistleblower@nmfb.com.ng. Livestock Microfinance Bank also wishes to inform the general public that the COVID-19 Targeted Credit Facility disbursed by our bank is a loan and beneficiaries must pay back with interest. The COVID-19 Targeted Credit Facility should not be misconstrued as a grant from the government. Call 094-621-730 or visit www.nmfb.com.ng for more information.
The Council of Our Fathers.
My advice to these young people is please do not take us back to those harrowing days. You probably do not know what it is.
Nigerian youths, let's build our nation together.
These days, people get their news and information from more media sources than ever before. Some of the news and information given are fake, unverified, doctored, and manufactured to create confusion, stir disaffection, and cause disunity. Before you believe or share any news, ask yourself, is this real? Is it from a credible source? Is it verified or verifiable? Fake news is dangerous, whether you do it for fun or for political gains. Real people can get hurt. Fake news, don't create it, don't spread it.
This is a public service announcement from NTA.
My name is Nancy Oyedia Orom. I'm AIT correspondent. I've been covering the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 the last 1 year. I just took the jab, the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, and it was seamless. And I was opportune to take these vaccines with the SGF, the ministers. So I want to use this medium as a journalist for someone who has experienced COVID in the last 1 year. I want to implore media houses, broadcast industries. Let's join hands together to propagate the good information out there for people to believe in these vaccines. That's That's the only way we can have health immunity and also achieve the projection and target of Nigeria come 2022. Well, I must implore all Nigerians to go out there, register on the Primary Healthcare Development Agency website. These vaccines are free for all Nigerians. Go to the website, register. It is free for you and I.
Life can be very eventful. We curiously expect things to happen, even when we don't know what. Our human nature makes us like and repost lots of information. Some are unverified, inciting anger and hate. Sometimes innocently, other times the urge to break it first. This, in most cases, has caused destruction in many nations.
All right, we're back again. You're still watching Good Morning Nigeria, and we have a very important topic this morning. And of course, we also have guests who are addressing the issue, like Dr. Momale here, who is key to this conversation, having come from the Ministry of Agriculture. A short while ago, Kinsley asked a question that has to do with the issue of statistics of the cattle we have in Nigeria. Because as we are planning to, of course, internationalize the business of cattle rearing in Nigeria, we also have to consider the numbers. And again, because of the ECOWAS protocol that we're all adhering to, we have infiltrators, or if we call it those who have the freedom of movement, as we have it in the protocol, who are also cattle rearers coming from different parts of the region in Nigeria. Some of them are wielding AK-47 with them, which is unusual here in Nigeria. The locals that we know that are cattle rearers don't usually carry AK-47, but we're beginning to see them. Now, with this plan that the presidency and for the ministry, this plan that is in focus at the moment, are you considering such individuals or group of cattle rearers coming from outside Nigeria? What is their place? Are you also carrying along members of Mietiala in this plan?
Okay, thank you very much. I think it's a very valid and important issue that has to do with the regional dimensions and some of the regional protocols and agreements to which Nigeria is a party. I think one of the key things that has been misunderstood, again in Nigeria, is the transhumance protocol. First of all, it needs to be understood that cross-border movement of livestock within the entire countries of the West Africa region is a traditional practice that was ongoing for a very long time. Even before colonialism, these borders were not existing. But with the creation of these nation states, post-colonialism, these borders were established and livestock were still moving across these borders. And the purpose of the ECOWAS transhumance protocol is actually not to allow free movement of animals, as is being thought about in many quarters in Nigeria. The purpose is actually to regulate and coordinate, provide a framework for coordinating and regulating the movement of livestock. Prior to the protocol, I can just come with my animals from anywhere, come to Nigeria and move out of Nigeria. But with the protocol, a system was provided. The first system says that for me to bring my livestock from any other country into Nigeria, first of all, I must present my particulars, indicating I am a citizen of a particular country. I must present a certificate of the health of my livestock, which will contain the total number of animals that I own and a certification from a veterinary professional from the originating country that my animals are of good health. And then third, in that certificate, I must state where I am going into in the country in which I'm entering and for how long am I going to stay in that particular areas. So you see, all the requirements needed to track and monitor the person entering into the country are provided for. So the ECOWAS Transhuman Protocol is an excellent institutional framework for controlling and regulating the cross-border movement of livestock across
what is the
countries.
practical experience?
The
Such
issue,
as we have on
the
the
challenge,
movement.
therefore, is that what is the level of implementation of this protocol is where the challenge comes. And this is what allow unregulated entry and exit of livestock across these borders. So contrary to our view that is the ECOWAS Transhuman Protocol that allows this, it is the non-implementation and non-enforcement of this protocol that has created this challenge.
In Nigeria?
In Nigeria and also in many other countries across West Africa.
So what should be our national reaction?
Presently, you could see that in terms of cross-border movement, there has been a lot of changes. And there has also, like you rightly said, new variants to some of these challenges. First of all, the insurgency in the northeast has blocked a substantial point of entry of livestock from Cameroon, the Republic of Chad, and the Difa province of Niger into Nigeria, because all of those areas are governed by insurgents, and therefore there is reduced in entry of pastoralists. So what we have, the greatest is between the borders in Ogun, Oyo, and Kwara, between the Republic of Benin and Nigeria, and then the states of Kebbi, Sokoto, Zamfara, and Katsina, with pastoralists mostly from Niger Republic into Nigeria. So what we need to do is to engage with authorities, and that's what we are going to do with authorities, particularly in the Republic of Niger, as well as Benin Republic. Two, first of all, ensure the enforcement of the provisions of the ECOWAS Transhuman Certificate. Once that protocol has been enforced, then you will be able to monitor who are the pastoralists that will come in, where they are going, and for how long they are going to stay, and therefore you'll be able to regulate what happens. To do that in Nigeria, that is why we are saying that the local institutions are very important, because patrolling the borders across these regions is beyond the capacity of the Nigerian Immigration Service, considering the thousands of kilometers that these borders crisscross. But where you have the institutions, community institutions, and you strengthen the leadership of the pastoral communities along the borders and the traditional rulers, they will be able to work with the Nigerian Immigration Services, the Nigerian Customs Services, and the Nigerian Police to regulate and coordinate movement across these borders. And once we move ahead in the implementation of these, we will regulate and provide conditions for the movement of livestock across these borders in the interim, while also working with these states also to work out mechanisms by which we can exploit positively for the benefit of Nigeria the entry of any animals into our country.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Bomale. My colleague Kirian and I, we've taken it on different aspects of various relevant ECOWAS protocols, the one of free movement, for instance, and law enforcement, the issue of the proliferation of small arms and light weapons, and the major challenge that law enforcement officers in Nigeria are having, whereas Nigeria tries to take the lead in this. There's very little cooperation coming from elsewhere on the West African coast. So this is part of why we have raised this issue of the full management of the protocol on transhumans. One point, I'm tempted to return to Professor Hamisu Shaributu before I go back to Professor Gideon Emelwe in Benin. Professor Shaributu, well, some persons have made the observation that is it necessarily the case that we're going to have livestock production in all the 36 states of the Federation and the Federal Capital Territory? That Well, the point is always, usually in economics, the law of comparative advantage. In which states do you have the most opportunity for a particular industry or a particular subsector to thrive? I mean, when we did geography in our elementary school days, if you drew a map of Nigeria, you will see rice and skin, you know, in the northern part of the country, groundnut in the northern part of the country, timber, palm oil, cocoa in the southern parts, you know, and so on and so forth. Is it that we are striving now to, you know, get all the states to be into livestock production? That's one question. Second question, also related to the issue of comparative advantage, because Dr. Mamale raises a very critical point to say, look, you're going to get investors into the production of feeds and so on and so forth. Is it not possible for, say, look, on account of space, you have the animals in some part of the country or some parts of the country where they have the space, and then another area will just be the one, say, producing the feeds. When you produce the feeds, you put them on trains to go and feed the animals, or you put them in trucks to go and feed the animals. Must it be that the feeds should be produced in situ where the animals are also located? I'm not quite clear about these points.
Thank you very much. Let me take us back to the agricultural transformation agenda under the Jonathan administration. I think specifically when Dr. Adeshina was the Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development. You will recall at that time, he followed the same pattern of geopolitical zones and decided to introduce this concept of comparative advantage. But if you look at that map, eventually, virtually every geopolitical zone indicated they can rear livestock. And this thing happened this time around when the National Livestock Transformation Agenda came into being. The moment money was mentioned, practically every person wanted to key in. As at the last time, records from the Department of Husbandry in the Federal Ministry of Agriculture indicated that 22 different states showed interest in livestock development. So you will find out that it depends on the disposition. Immediately the government comes out to say we have money to do this, everybody rushes into it. The same thing happened with rice production. Virtually every state is saying we can grow rice. If you talk about palm oil, every place will say the target is actually what money is going to come from the federal government, the federal post. So this is what is making it very, very difficult for us to actually compartmentalize areas of production. I'm just citing this as an example for people to know how complex our nation is. The moment you say you want to do afforestation, the person from the north will say, yes, afforestation is good for us. The person from the south, because of the financial aspect, will say we want it. The same thing with erosion. When you want to introduce measures to curb erosion in the southeast, the person from the north will also come up and say, no, we also want it, because we look at everything as if it's a national cake. This time around, we have to be very, very realistic about it. And let me say this. Dr. Adeshina had actually proposed this concept of let us produce livestock over there. We must not trek this livestock to Lagos. The person in Lagos or in Enugu is more interested in the meat than seeing livestock live. And if he has the facility that the livestock feeds, if he has the facility to produce the feed and export it over there, he can actually do it. But our flair for saying let us share from the national cake is what is truncating the whole of this concept. There is nothing wrong with actually producing the livestock where they are. We have, and we know that there are some governors that actually propose, why don't you rear this livestock in Sambisa forest? Are we ready to do it? Are we ready to actually invest? And I know I have appeared in several fora to say that, look, let us look at our budget. Let us analyze on state-by-state basis. What are the actual investment or the capital proposal for even agriculture in general in all the states of the Federation? And try to see, you will find out that we are just playing pranks. We are just joking over this thing. There is nothing statistically wrong, nothing strategically wrong with having these ranches established in the north and then having them. But that is in a situation where you are looking at the animal resources from the perspective of cattle. What do you talk about pigs? What do you talk about rabbit? What do you talk about grass cutter? What do you talk about chicken, for example? These are all things that are supposed to be embedded in it. So within the grazing reserve, the provision is for veterinary service, for marketing, for transportation, for livestock service centers, for veterinary clinics, and then for pasture development. Further development is key to the issue of livestock production. But if, for example, the southern part, especially areas like Ebonyi and the northern part of Enugu State, if they can produce feed, they have a good place to provide job for people, and then we can easily take, some of these feed out. Like, for example, again, if you get to 9th Mile, there's this brewery there. Some of the feeds that are actually being fed to the livestock actually come from what we call brewers' spent grain. That is the aftermath of processing of wheat, which is what is here. The breweries do not utilize wheat that is produced in Enugu. No, they utilize wheat that is being produced from the northern part of this country. So this is a concept that we will all study. The most important thing is let us have the technical people, technologies of development, the animal scientists that are there in various states. Let the governors call them. Let them sit down and propose a solution so that it will go through the various houses of assembly and let us adopt it. I think this is where we're supposed to go.
All right, thank you very much indeed, Kingsley. If government is rolling out some money...
Are you thanking me?
No, I'm saying that we should engage in ranching as well, because from what he has said, when money is available, everybody wants to do the same, engage in the same kind of business. We can engage in ranching, honestly.
No, just a subset of feed. If it is feed production or logistics.
Okay,
I'm sure Dr. Momale will take another aspect of it and then do...
Okay, Professor Gideon Emelue, please, for want of time, we'll not ask you any fresh question, but I would like you to react to some of the issues that have been raised by Dr. Momale with respect to the issue of protocol, ECOWAS protocol, and of course what we've heard from Secretary General of Agricultural Research Council of Nigeria.
Nigerians, I think we have all agreed that there is need to do things differently with this livestock, the cow rearing, and the rest. My belief is that the ranching of cows or ranching of other types of livestock will help to assuage what is going on now, because I try to listen very well about statistics. And I don't know who takes care of the cows moving from one state to the other. I didn't hear anything about it. Cows moving from Nasarawa to Benue, who knows the statistics? The one going to Oyo State, who knows the statistics? And that's where the problem is. So why trying to get to the direction of ranching, wholesale ranching? Who bears the brunt of all these issues, these conflicts? Who bears it? I've been asking this question. Is it the driver of the motor or is it the owner of the motor? Nobody has been talking about who owns cows up till now. And it perturbs me. We have been talking about, I told you before that the forest reserve is owned by state. The national parks are owned by the federal government. And the grazing reserve, of course, is still under the state, grazing. And so we should, why trying to start this war? Because if we say, let us start now, if there is nothing to fall back to, there is tendency to believe that, oh, the certain state governments, governors have arbitrarily acted. They didn't, they have acted well because they need to stop an action or else it will snowball into some other things. I want to make an appeal that those who are involved, let them walk the talk. It's not just to talk. If you talk about forest reserve in the south, turning it to become a grazing reserve, it's not as easy as you are looking at it. In fact, all over the world, all over Africa, the forest is innocently looking the way they are looking. You have to utilize where you are supposed to utilize. It's not a mode that you must put machine guns in all the forest reserve. We should all agree that this is the way we want to work. This is the way, this is our boundary. Nobody is saying pack away from your state if you want to raise a cow. What they are talking about is that ranching is the modern method. Those who have this investment should also invest. They should put something into it. Because we have been talking. Those who are, somebody wants to have a car, you don't want to invest anything. Just move from one place and use my farm to feed your cow. At the end, when you sell your cow, you are not going to, I don't have any share. So I think the earlier we walk the talk, the better. Thank you.
Well, Professor Gideon Emelue of the Department of Forest Resources and Wildlife Management at the University of Benin, at Benin City, would like to thank you for your contribution to our discussion today. You joined us from our Benin Network studios. We also would like to appreciate the Executive Secretary of the Agricultural Research Council of Nigeria, Professor Hamisu Shaributu from Enugu. You joined us. Thanks a lot for being always available on Good Morning Nigeria. And the technical advisor to the Honorable Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development, Dr. Saleh Momale, we thank you for being with us. There's an issue that is on the table. I had raised it in one of our earlier conversations. Professor Emelue has amplified it now. Who are the owners of the cattle, and what is their responsibility in ensuring that all of these plans and programs come to fruition so that the friction that we're having at the moment gets attenuated? I'm sure that that's an issue we'll focus on some other time, Kyria.
Exactly. And that's Good Morning Nigeria for today. We thank you for joining us. Please return again tomorrow when we'll be back with a fresh edition of the morning show. My name is Kyria Imaya. Have a great day.
And I'm Kingsley Osadola. Take care of yourself.